15 million banana trees, and the world called him insane. That was the command of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, a young soldier who stood before his people and dared to dream where others only predicted failure. In the Sahel, a land cursed by drought and dust, he declared that bananas would rise from the sand. Foreign newspapers ridiculed him. Economists sneered it was economic suicide. French broadcasters laughed, their voices dripping with contempt. A desperate soldier chasing fantasies. To outsiders, it was madness. But inside Burkina Faso, something deeper stirred. For decades, the people had been told what they could not do. You cannot resist the desert. You cannot feed yourselves. You cannot prosper without foreign aid. And now, their leader was saying the opposite. Every tree is a soldier. 15 million soldiers to fight hunger, poverty, and humiliation. It was not just agriculture. It was a declaration of war against dependency, against despair, against the lie that Africa must always bow. And so one question echoed across the land: can a forest of bananas planted in defiance of nature itself truly save a nation? The night Captain Ibrahim Traoré appeared on television, the silence was electric. Across Burkina Faso, families leaned close to radios and flickering screens, expecting another cautious speech about security or aid. Instead, they heard words that would echo across Africa. 15 million banana trees, he declared, and the world called him insane. At first, many thought they had misheard. Bananas. In the Sahel, where millet withers, where goats chew dust for lack of grass, where the horizon glows with dust storms, the announcement seemed less like policy than prophecy. Elders stared at each other in disbelief. Mothers tightened their wraps around hungry children. Young men exchanged nervous laughter, whispering, could he be serious? Yet the captain pressed on, draped in the national flag. His voice carried defiance. Every seedling will be a soldier in our fight for survival. Every tree, a promise of sovereignty. His words did not tremble. They cracked like thunder. Abroad, the reaction was instant and merciless. Parisian anchors mocked him live on air. Le Monde sneered, the fantasy of a desperate soldier. The Financial Times dismissed it as economic suicide. French broadcasters chuckled, looping the clip with sarcastic commentary. Bananas in the desert, the dream of a reckless captain. In London, development experts filled studio panels. Bananas demand water, irrigation, infrastructure. One analyst lectured, Burkina Faso has none. A diplomat in Brussels was blunter. He is gambling with his nation's very survival. Aid agencies released cautious statements, warning against misguided populism. To the world's elites, Traoré was a fool. But inside Burkina Faso, something shifted. For decades, the Burkinabe had been told the same sermon: you cannot resist the desert. You cannot feed yourselves. You cannot prosper without aid. Now, for the first time, a leader was saying the opposite. In Ouagadougou, youth spilled into the streets, chanting the number as if it were a battle cry. 15 million. In Bobo-Dioulasso, a radio host captured the mood perfectly. For the first time, we are told not what we cannot do, but what we can. Farmers, long resigned to bare soil, began to imagine wide green leaves shielding the ground from the killing sun. Women whispered about cooperatives drying bananas into chips, grinding them into flour, turning them into baby food. Students wrote online, if we can grow bananas, we can grow an economy. To the outside world, it was lunacy. To the hungry, it was hope. To the poor, it was defiance. And that defiance frightened those who profited from dependency. In Washington, analysts muttered about reckless nationalism. In Brussels, aid agencies tightened their warnings. Development banks dismissed the plan as a public relations stunt. Behind closed doors, diplomats speculated it was never meant to succeed, only to rouse naive pride. Yet across Burkina Faso, the proclamation was a spark thrown onto dry grass. Planting bananas was no longer about fruit. It was about dignity, about sovereignty, about refusing to bow. What foreign commentators labeled suicide, ordinary villagers began to see as survival. The captain had set the stage for a confrontation larger than crops. A confrontation between dependency and dignity, between mockery abroad and hope at home. And so the question burned across the savannah. Could 15 million banana trees, planted in the face of drought and derision, truly rescue a nation abandoned by the world? Or would the desert swallow the dream before the first harvest? The answer would not come from diplomats or economists, it would come from the soil itself. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré chose bananas, the world mocked him louder than ever. Bananas in the desert. Absurd. One European analyst smirked. A soldier chasing fantasies. To outsiders, bananas were children's snacks for supermarket shelves in Paris. Not survival rations in the Sahel. But what they did not see, what Traoré saw, was that bananas were not just fruit. They were a system, a living machine capable of feeding, employing, and liberating a nation. The first weapon of this system was speed. In a country where hunger stalks every season, no one could wait years for trees to bear fruit. Bananas offered something radical. Food in 12 months. Families could eat them fresh, slice and dry them under the sun, or grind them into flour for bread and porridge. This was not a luxury crop grown for export. It was survival on a plate, within a single growing cycle. But survival was only the entry point. Bananas created entire markets where none had existed. In Ouagadougou, traders dreamed of selling local bananas for half the cost of expensive imports. In Bobo-Dioulasso, women sketched plans for cooperatives producing banana chips, banana flour, and even baby food for local clinics. What aid workers had long promised with handouts, villagers now imagined building with their own hands. One woman declared on community radio, "With bananas, I will feed my children and sell at the market. No foreign company can take that away from me." Then came what outsiders dismissed as waste. Banana trunks and leaves, often discarded in coastal plantations, turned into powerful resources. Chopped and shredded, they became animal feed. Chickens laid more eggs. Goats produced richer milk. Cattle grew fatter, faster. For a nation where livestock feed was scarce and costly, this was revolutionary. A single crop was now feeding both people and animals, cutting expenses for families who had once spent their last coins on imported feed. And the impact stretched further. Youth saw more than farming. They saw transport jobs hauling bananas to markets, new businesses packaging dried chips, even factories processing flour and drinks. Students posted online, "If we can grow bananas, we can grow an economy." Bananas, once mocked, were now a spark for enterprise. For women, the transformation was personal. Cotton profits were locked in the hands of men and corporations. Gold wealth flowed to foreign companies while villages remained poor. Bananas were different. Women's cooperatives claimed them as their own. Groups gathered in courtyards slicing, drying, packaging. Income meant power. Power meant dignity. One cooperative leader put it plainly, "Cotton belongs to the world. Gold belongs to foreigners. Bananas belong to us." And sovereignty was at the heart of it. Cotton prices rose and fell on trading floors in New York. Gold markets were dictated by banks in London. Burkina Faso had no control. Bananas, by contrast, offered resilience. If exports failed, families could eat them. If markets slowed, they could be dried and stored. Unlike cotton and gold, bananas did not enslave the producer. They freed them. Then came the ecological genius hidden in plain sight. Planted in clusters, banana trees shaded the soil, reducing evaporation by nearly half. Their roots trapped rainwater, holding the soil against erosion. Beneath their broad leaves, farmers could grow beans, onions, or peanuts. Each banana grove became a miniature fortress, a green shield where the desert's advance was forced to stop. Foreign experts saw fruit. Traoré saw soldiers, and he repeated it again and again until it became a national mantra. Every tree is a soldier. 15 million soldiers against hunger, poverty, and humiliation. The people cheered. For the first time in decades, the Burkinabe were not being told what they could not do. They were told what they could. Still, a haunting question remained. Could this system truly endure? Could poor farmers with little irrigation, little money, and no margin for failure turn millions of seedlings into a new economy? Could bananas really succeed where cotton and gold had enslaved them? The world scoffed. The people believed, and belief, in a land long starved of hope, was already a revolution. It did not look like farming. It looked like war. When the first banana seedlings rolled into Ouagadougou on the backs of military trucks, people poured into the streets not to celebrate, but to enlist. Farmers, teachers, soldiers, children. Each one was handed a sapling, as if it were a weapon. The message was unmistakable. Every tree is a soldier. 15 million soldiers. Schools became barracks of this new army. At dawn, children carried buckets of water before opening their books. Teachers shouted instructions with the tone of drill sergeants. Protect this tree as you protect your life. This is your duty. Radio broadcasts echoed the same line. Bananas are not fruit. They are bullets against hunger. Planting days felt like mobilizations. Drums pounded like war cries. Elders raised their hands in solemn blessing, declaring, "These are not seedlings. These are shields." Women marched in long lines, balancing saplings on their heads, chanting, "Water the soldiers, feed the soldiers, guard the soldiers." Soldiers, once feared as symbols of conflict, now dug trenches and hauled water beside villages. Guns were replaced by shovels. The banana army spread across the land. In Bobo Dioulasso, a woman told a journalist, "Cotton fed foreigners, gold fed corporations. Bananas will feed us. These trees are our revolution." In dusty villages, children nicknamed themselves banana soldiers, proudly patrolling the fields at night to chase away goats and cattle. Youth brigades erected makeshift fences and guarded irrigation ditches like strategic assets. The world mocked the sight. French anchors jeered. They plant, the desert will eat. A European agronomist scoffed. They call trees soldiers. Soon they will hold funerals for bananas. The World Bank issued warnings about wasted water. Development banks dismissed it as reckless populism. To Western audiences, it looked like delusion on a national scale. But inside Burkina Faso, mockery only stiffened resolve. On a crackling radio broadcast, a young man's words cut through the noise. If they laugh, it means they fear us. If they fear us, we are winning. That sentence spread like wildfire, painted on walls, whispered in markets, repeated in classrooms. What was once an insult had become a slogan of defiance. Even neighboring nations felt the tremors. In Mali, Niger, and Ghana, people followed the story with fascination. Some scoffed. Others whispered, "If Burkina Faso can plant bananas in the desert, maybe we can too." Their leaders hesitated, afraid of ridicule, but their citizens saw something dangerous. I hope this mobilization was not just about farming. It was rebellion. Each sapling driven into the soil was an act of resistance against decades of dependency. Each seedling carried the weight of history, the humiliation of being told, "You cannot resist the desert. You cannot feed yourselves. You cannot prosper without aid." And yet, beneath the chants and the frenzy, feeling farmers knew the cruelty of the Sahel. They had seen dreams shrivel before. At one planting ceremony, an elder's voice trembled as he warned, "The desert is merciless. If these soldiers fall, despair will strike harder than hunger itself." His words echoed a truth no slogan could erase. The banana army was powerful in spirit, but fragile in the face of nature. Still, they marched. Children sang in dusty courtyards. Women sharpened their determination like blades. Soldiers stood guard, not over borders, but over fields. The desert loomed, patient and merciless, waiting to strike. The question hanging over the nation was no longer if the people would fight. They had already declared war. The real question was brutal. Would this army of trees march toward triumph or collapse in the dust, leaving a broken people more wounded than before? The desert struck back with a vengeance. The first photographs were brutal. Fields that had once looked like hope itself now lay in ruins. Seedlings drooped, their leaves curled and brown, their fragile trunks twisted in the dust. In some villages, entire plantations shriveled in less than a month. Termites swarmed and chewed through tender stems. Goats and cattle wandered into fields and snapped young trees in half. Rains came suddenly in violent bursts, drowning the roots, then vanished for weeks, leaving soil cracked open like scars across the land. The banana army that had marched with songs now stood in silence. Planting festivals turned into scenes of mourning. The smell of dead vegetation mixed with dry earth. Mothers held their children close, whispering, "Perhaps we wasted our strength." Fathers looked at barren fields and muttered, "Maybe the foreigners were right." Children who had been told these trees were soldiers of freedom stared at the corpses of plants and asked, "Why did our soldiers die?" Western media feasted on the disaster. Parisian newspapers splashed mocking headlines. "TRAORÉ'S desert bananas collapse." Le Monde sneered, "The mad dream is over." In London, a columnist called it agricultural suicide, broadcast in real time. French broadcasters replayed clips of dead banana fields with anchors chuckling. On American television, analysts smirked. This was predictable. A reckless captain gambling with his people's survival. The humiliation was sharp, almost unbearable. Hope, once raised to the heavens, was now crushed into the soil, and hope lost is heavier than hunger. Yet in this moment of despair, Captain Ibrahim Traoré did the unthinkable. He did not hide. He traveled to the hardest-hit regions, where farmers stood over fields of death. Cameras followed as he bent down, pulled a brittle stem from the soil, and held it high above his head. It was dry, lifeless. The very image of defeat. The crowd expected excuses. Instead, they heard defiance. "This one is gone," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "But another will stand." Sovereignty does not sprout in one season. It grows with persistence. Those words spread like fire across the nation. Replayed on radios, whispered in markets, carved into the hearts of children. Suddenly, every dead tree was no longer a symbol of failure, but an image of the enemy, the desert itself. The battle had been reframed. It was no longer about one season or one harvest. It was about endurance. Each corpse of a banana plant was not a loss, but a fallen soldier, and every fallen soldier demanded another to rise in its place. Foreign critics mocked, even louder. A European analyst sneered. He is leading them into delusion. Aid agencies repeated their warnings. Precious water is being wasted. Economists lectured that Burkina Faso was chasing a dream that could never bear fruit. But inside Burkina Faso, those insults became fuel. Every jeer from Paris or London was turned into proof that sovereignty frightened the powerful. In Bobo Dioulasso, a farmer spat into the dust and told a journalist, "If the desert kills one tree, we will plant two. If the French laugh, we will make them choke on their laughter." His words were repeated on community radio and scribbled onto school walls. The banana army regrouped. Farmers replanted. Women returned with buckets at dawn. Children carried water once again, chanting, "Do not let the soldiers die." Soldiers dug deeper trench, guarded irrigation ditches, and patrolled fields as if they were fortresses under siege. The new mantra spread across the land. If the desert strikes once, we strike back twice. Failure was no longer the end. Failure had become part of the war. But one brutal question still lingered. Could determination alone keep millions of banana trees alive in a land where drought was king? Could sheer willpower defeat the merciless Sahel? Or would the desert, patient and ruthless, devour this dream before the first true harvest? The answer would not be written in speeches or slogans. It would be written in the soil itself. The turning point did not come from slogans. It came from science. After the desert's assault, many believed the dream was finished. Entire groves lay dead, families broken. But in the laboratories of the National Research Institute, a different battle was being prepared. Agronomists worked day and night, searching for banana varieties tough enough to survive the Sahel's brutality. From East Africa, they brought new strains shorter, thicker-skinned, with roots like claws gripping the soil. These were not delicate Cavendish bananas for supermarket shelves in Europe. These were survival machines. Farmers who had lost entire fields were taught to fight differently. No longer did they scatter seedlings on bare ground. They dug circular pits, known locally as zai, that captured every drop of rainfall and funneled it into the roots. Families gathered dried grasses, shredded stalks, even the husks of old crops to cover the soil in thick mulch. Under that blanket, moisture lingered longer. Fragile trunks stood a chance. Then came technology. With help from local engineers, the army installed solar-powered drip irrigation systems in pilot villages. Instead of wasting scarce water across entire fields, thin pipes carried it, drop by drop directly to the roots. Even in the driest weeks, the steady trickle kept plants alive. The results were shocking. Survival rates that had once collapsed to 20% began to climb 40%, lower. In some plots, even 80%. What had looked like certain failure transformed into resilience. In the countryside, the change was visible. Where families had once stared at shriveled seedlings, now they saw rows of broad green leaves pushing defiantly against the horizon. Children played in their shade. Women planted beans, groundnuts, and onions beneath the canopy, harvesting food even before the bananas fruited. Livestock fed on shredded trunks and leaves, producing more milk and meat than before. A cycle of survival was taking shape, bananas feeding people, feeding animals, feeding the land itself. Yet the outside world refused to accept what was happening. International economists warned that Burkina Faso was drinking its future dry. Bananas were thirsty crops. They insisted, and a drought-prone nation could not sustain them. Aid agencies predicted reservoirs would fail, groundwater would collapse, and famine would return. To critics abroad, the experiment remained reckless populism, a leader playing with hope. But the numbers told another story. Fields shaded by banana groves lost nearly half as much water to evaporation as bare soil. Mulched plots retained double the moisture. Villages that once relied on expensive imported livestock feed now shredded banana trunks to sustain their herds, cutting costs by nearly 40%. Manure from the animals fertilized the banana fields, creating a cycle of abundance. For ordinary farmers, proof was not in spreadsheets but in survival. A woman named Mariam, leader of a small cooperative, told a radio host, "Last year we had only dust. This year I sold bananas and bought school supplies for my children. You tell me if that is failure." Her words carried more weight in the villages than the pronouncements of distant economists. The critics had expected collapse. Instead, every obstacle had produced innovation. Every setback had triggered new strategy. What had begun as a gamble was mutating into a system. And so, a new question arose. Bigger than hunger? Bigger than survival? If bananas could endure in the Sahel, could they do more? Could they become the backbone of a new economy? A weapon not only against famine, but against dependency itself. The world had mocked the idea, but the world was no longer laughing. By the third year, the fields of Burkina Faso no longer looked like fragile experiments. They looked like orchards of defiance, green armies stretching across land once surrendered to the desert. The banana army had survived its baptism of fire, and now it was marching into triumph. Markets told the story first. In Ouagadougou, local traders stacked bunches of bananas high on wooden carts. For the first time, fruit once reserved for elites and imports was now sold cheaply on street corners. Children ate bananas, not as rare treats, but as daily food. Schools added them to meal programs, replacing foreign donations with local harvests. Restaurants invented banana-based dishes. In dusty rural markets, women sold dried chips in small plastic bags. And queues formed. Then came the regional wave. Trucks rumbled down desert roads into Mali and Niger, carrying bananas labeled "Product of Burkina Faso." For decades, neighbors had mocked the idea of bananas in the Sahel. Now they were buying them by the ton. Across West Africa, the impossible was becoming undeniable. And then the international breakthrough. A cargo container stamped bananas of the Sahel product of Burkina Faso arrived in Dubai. Buyers who had once scoffed at the plan now tasted fruit firm, sweet, competitive with coastal imports. Contracts multiplied. Soon, smaller shipments reached Europe, marketed as exotic, resilient, grown, where deserts once ruled. The very crop once ridiculed as madness was now advertised as a miracle. The economic shockwaves rippled everywhere. Cotton had long chained Burkina Faso to volatile markets controlled abroad. Gold had enriched foreign companies while leaving villages in poverty. But bananas were different. They belonged to the people. Profits flowed into local councils, into wells, into schools, into solar grids. Roads were paved not by aid donors but by banana cooperatives. For women, the change was seismic. Cooperatives gave them income and power. In villages, women pooled their earnings to buy grinding machines, sewing machines, even to fund clinics. Mariam, a cooperative leader, told a radio host, "Before, we begged. Now we decide." Her words echoed across the nation. The true revolution was not just food or money, it was dignity. Youth, too, seized their moment. Small businesses sprang up producing banana beer, banana flour, banana sweets, even banana-based animal feed. For the first time in decades, young men spoke not of leaving the country, but of building it. One group painted on a wall in Ouagadougou, "Our future is green." And culture followed economics. Harvest festivals erupted, with drums pounding through the night. Children danced, carrying bunches of fruit. Artists painted murals of banana groves on city walls. A new national banknote was printed, carrying the image of banana orchards beside the flag. The fruit had become more than food. It was an emblem. Internationally, the laughter stopped. Aid agencies that had mocked now issued cautious reports calling the project a model of resilience. Corporations that had once dismissed Burkina Faso now scrambled to protect their markets. Across Africa, headlines spoke of the banana revolution. Delegations from Mali, Ghana, and Niger arrived to study the model. The impossible had become the blueprint. At the African Union, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood with authority. No longer dismissed as a reckless soldier, he was now a statesman. His words thundered across the hall. Sovereignty is not a slogan. It is a mother feeding her child from her own soil. It is a father earning with his own hands. It is a people trading with dignity. Burkina Faso had risen from mockery to model, from dependency to defiance, from despair to dignity. The banana army had not just survived, it had conquered 15 million banana trees. What began as mockery had become a miracle. Across Burkina Faso, orchards now stand where dust once reigned. Families eat from their own soil. Women earn with their own hands. Children study under schools built with banana profits. Livestock grow stronger on banana stalks. Roads are paved. Wells are dug. Clinics are funded not by donors, not by corporations, but by the sweat of a people who dared to believe. This is the Captain Ibrahim. Latest news the world cannot ignore. Once dismissed as reckless, Traoré has become the symbol of defiance turned into sovereignty. His gamble became a shield. His shield became an economy. And his economy became a movement. Burkina Faso, latest news, is no longer about instability or dependency. It is about victory wrestled from the desert itself. And yet, the lesson is larger than one nation. If 15 million banana trees can turn dust into dignity, then what could 1 billion Africans achieve if they chose sovereignty over dependency? What could an entire continent do if it refused to bow, if it refused the chains of aid, if it planted freedom with its own hands? Across villages, the banana army chants still echo. If the desert strikes once, we strike back twice. That is not just about farming. That is about Africa. About you. About me. About every person who still believes the future can be grown, not borrowed. So I ask you, do you believe freedom can be planted and harvested? Do you believe Africa can rise? If you do, write it in the comments below. Say it out loud. Declare it. Africa can do it. It's time for Africa. Because this story is not over. This is not just news. This is the truth they buried for years. Now it is uncovered. Now it is alive. If this report has unveiled a hidden truth for you, do not scroll past. Share it. Speak it. Subscribe, because they hid our history long enough. Let us speak our future out loud. The banana army has marched. Africa must march with it.